Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. Today we will be talking about Dockerfile. Basically, how can you create your own Docker image and some of the best practices to create a secure Docker image. So, what is a Dockerfile? It is basically a configuration file which is needed to create Docker image. It contains the list of commands to assemble your image. Let's take an example. Suppose you need to containerize your application. What are the actual requirements? You need a base image. A base image is something that will fulfill your main requirement. Example, you want to containerize an Python application, then your base image should be a Python image. But if you are creating a Java application, then you must use some OpenJDK, which means your main library should be your base image. Then you need to copy the executables or the source code. And then you set up the environment of the application, like setting up the environment variables or the passing on the secrets or certs to the application. And then you can run the application. So that is a basic format of Dockerfile. And whatever we get out from this is the Docker image that you can use to run the application. If you haven't watched my previous video regarding the basics of Docker and Docker image, then you can click on the I button. So these are the documents for Dockerfile reference. As you can see, the general format is first the instruction, the keyword, and then the arguments we need to pass. For example, run echo and then the string. Now let's build something of our own. This is a Python file which apparently works on my system. Here I am just creating a server and it listens to port 8000. Now I will run this file. Server started, and if I check my browser, so in my browser I can check that these are the list of the files in that server. And here we can check the logs. Now if I want to containerize this simple application or the server, I need to create a Docker file. Okay, first of all I need to decide about the base image. So let's check what is the base image. Since my application is based on Python, I will go for a Python based image. Okay, here I am on Docker Hub and I will search for Python. This is the Python official Docker image, so I will check this. Okay, here it is showing me all the images available. So here you can go either with the one that you have installed locally. Suppose locally you have Python 3.10, then you can go with that. And if you have the latest version, then you can choose that. So even in Python 3.10, I have these multiple versions. Now amongst these images, how to choose like which one is compatible with your application. Each of these images have difference of some functionality and some size. The Alpine images are considered to be the smallest size, and the slim images contains the normal functionality with the minimum libraries, and then there's Bullseye. Understand each of them, either you can expand these Docker files or you can simply go with the Alpine one, try it out and test your container, and if it works then go with it. Here you need to balance out with the size to the functionality. So this is my Docker file. I will go with the 3.10 Alpine image because that is the minimal image, and if my application will not work with this image, I will choose the slim image. I can either go with the full image Python 3.10, but that will be a heavier image and I will keep that as my last option. After my base image, I am using the copy command to copy the contents of my current folder inside a folder called app. If the folder app is not there inside the image, it will be created on its own. And then I am exposing the port 8000. This means that my server, which is listening to port 8000, will be exposed to external network. And then I am assigning the app as my work directory. So whatever command I am going to execute after this line number 7, it will be executed inside my app directory. And in the end, I am writing a cmd command where I am mentioning Python and then server.py, which is running the server.py file. In case I have some entry point script which will do some pre-processing before starting the server, then I will use the entry point command and then mention the script name. Okay, now let's build the image. Here I will go with the command docker build, and then I will put the tag as my app, and this is my version 1.0, and I will put the dot as the context. This dot will define the context of my Docker build, which is this folder Dockerfile. So it was quick, and now we can check using the command docker images. It is just 54 MB. Now let's run the application. So this is my port for my host machine, and this is the port of the container where our application is running. So using this command, I am mapping my ports, and this is the image that we have just now created. So that's how we write a docker run command. Now I can check my browser for localhost 9000 because that's the port I have mapped, and here it shows all the listing. Another thing is that we do not need the Docker file inside our application. I will show you an example that you can create a .dockerignore file and then just write Docker file. Here you can list out the files which you want to ignore and then save it. Here we will again build the image. I will go with Docker build 2.0. Sorry, I need to put the context as Docker build 2.0. I will again run the application using the newer created image. And when I go to my browser, I reload this page, it will just show me the dockerignore file. As you can see that it has already ignored the Docker file. I think we have missed something. Here I will add the dockerignore file as well to ignore this. And then I will build. Now when I check browser, it is just showing me the main file which is required, server.py. So this is how you can containerize your application. It can be a simple server or it can be a complex application. Now let's check some of the best practices of creating a Docker file. One is to keep the image small. So it is recommended that we should keep the base image as smallest as possible. Do not include any unnecessary dependencies, and if there are, we should remove them. This will not only make your image faster to download and deploy, but it also reduces the attack surface. So that's why it is recommended to use a dockerignore file. We have just did that. And then minimize the number of layers. So these individual commands or instructions will form individual layers of images. And the final one that we got will be created after this line. So it is recommended to minimize the number of layers, but you should keep the security in mind. Next is to use the multi-stage build. Now, what is a multi-stage build? Suppose you have a Java application and you need to install the application. First, you are going to copy the installer file, then you will run the installation commands. So your final image might contain the installer files as well that you don't want. Instead, you can just install it in one stage and then copy the installed files and the required libraries to another image and use that image for the final deployment. Doing this will create the smaller image. If you want, I can make a detailed video on how to create a multi-stage build. Just let me know in the comment section. Then we should use a specific versions. Like whenever you define a base image, if you do not mention any version, then it will just take the latest one and it will build from that. That latest image might not be compatible with your app. So just go with specific version and from time to time keep them updated. Then we have this that run only one process per container. Your application might be running multiple processes like adding details to database, getting it from there, or running multiple services at once. So it is recommended to run just one process per container and try to divide your application into many services. Now use a health check. So what is a health check? It is basically a command that will keep on checking the health of your container. It will ping your server from time to time in order to check its health. And then another thing is to document your Docker file. So it will be helpful for you to write comments on each of the line. This will help you in editing it later and sharing it with other developers. Another one is to use the official base image. Just now when we were exploring the Python Docker image, it was showing that this is our official Docker image, and then to keep the image up to date. So whatever base image you are using, you must try to keep it updated with the latest version because that will reduce the security vulnerabilities. Here, my application will be run as a root user, which is risky because anyone who can access the container will be able to access anything inside the container because it is root user. So instead, it is recommended to create another user and give it certain permissions to just run this application and not the whole root user permission or a super user. Use environment variables to pass in sensitive information like passwords or API keys to the container rather than hard coding them in the Docker file. Another thing is to use copy instead of add. When you use the add command, it can download files from the remote URLs as well. So it is recommended to use the copy command and it will just copy from your local directories inside the container. Then minimize the number of exposed ports. So as you have just seen that we have exposed port 8000. Similar way, you should just expose the required ports only and you should avoid using the default ports. Configure a firewall in the container to block unnecessary incoming and outgoing traffic and to prevent unauthorized access. One should use a security scanner such as Docker Security Scanning or Anchor to scan the image for any known vulnerabilities or risk. So that's it for today. If you find this video helpful, press the like button and subscribe to my channel.